What up, world? We are going live here with Dr. Tommy Wood here soon, as soon as the good doctor himself comes popping in. There he goes. How about that? All right, Tommy. I think I did that right. These, like the start of Instagram lives, are always the worst because it's always idiots like me trying to get things started, and you're like, "Yo, can you just get the business here?" Tommy, where'd you go? Are you here? Go live with Tommy. Come on, let's roll, bud. I think Tommy screwed it up. That's why. I'm blaming this all on Tommy. Yo, what's up, Ireland? I used to live in Ireland. I spent like 6 months, 8 months, no, 6 months, like solid 6 months in Galway. It's fantastic. Tommy, what is going on? Yo, definitely my fault, Tommy. Try again, dude. I don't know what I did. I've never screwed this up before, Tommy, so things are getting real skeptical here. It says Tommy Woods is unable to join. Why is Tommy Wood unable to join? Tommy Wood able to join. Go live with Dr. Tommy Wood. What is going on here, friends? Maybe Tommy is too smart. They won't allow him to do this. There it is. There
Hey,
we go.
hey.
Dude, you totally screwed that up, didn't you?
I clicked the request button and then everything else is your fault after that.
Dude, I kept hitting accept. I think I got too excited. I hit accept like 100 times. How are you, brother?
Wait, somebody said, who's Tommy? Ouch. Well, maybe they'll find out.
Ooh, just block yourself. Just go ahead and block yourself. Dude, Tommy, the infamous Tommy Wood of all kinds of fame. How do you not know Tommy at this point?
Right.
Dope. Man, I hate delaying these things. People don't want to hear our chit chat. So let's
Yeah.
get into some science. Let me lay the background down, and then you're going to be the star of the show here. All right. So Tommy just put out a really nice paper. Was kind enough to let me be involved in it just a tiny bit. So I wanted to talk about it because I actually think it's pretty impactful, man. I know actually some other stuff we have going on that's going to really support that, but I think this really was. I think I tweeted something that to the effect of that. I really do think this changes how we think about the brain and muscle and exercise in a pretty big way. It's not groundbreaking. I don't want to oversell it, but it's like pretty important, I think. So wanted you to walk through all that, kind of like what we found, what it means, why it matters, all that stuff for the folks that because it is. I'll be honest, it's a fairly technical paper, so
Yeah.
it's a little bit tough to kind of get through. So this might be a little bit easier for folks. So if you could uh, walk them kind of just through like what was the idea, the inception, how we get there, and then we'll jump into like, man, what did we find? What did we see? Or no, hell with it. Let's do the opposite. Give them like the big show right out the gates. Like, what was the big one or two, three things that you found and Christy found, and then we'll kind of walk backwards into what all that stuff means. So, for you that don't know, Tommy is a neuroscientist at the University of Washington, but also heavily involved in a lot of human performance athletes and things like that. So full-time neuroscientist, runs a lab out there by day, but also certainly in the field as well. So that's Tommy in a nutshell.
Yeah.
Plus, I'm like a mediocrely talented strongman. We'll put it that way, like
Yeah,
mediocre at best.
mediocrely talented is the perfect description. Uh, yeah, so I guess the high line is, and these data were from individuals in their 60s plus, right? So older individuals. We essentially found that neuromuscular function, which is essentially how strong they were relative to their body mass, body composition. And we in the study we had data on leg strength. Like normally it's grip strength, which is like okay, but this is much better, right? Because it's a major muscle group. So leg strength, and we found that was one of the best predictors of cognitive function on a standardized cognitive test. After taking into account a whole bunch of other stuff, like how physically active they were, and a whole bunch of other like risk factors for dementia or cognitive decline. The other major thing that we found that I thought was really interesting and kind of surprised me was that in it, like to start with, I went in thinking like more muscle mass was going to be associated with better cognitive function, and there have been some other people who've kind of found something like that before, and we didn't find that. And then from there, we kind of looked at why, and it's because at the population level, this is a big population data set, like 1,500 people. Physical activity did not correlate with muscle mass. So those people who had more muscle mass were not gaining muscle mass because they were going to the gym. They were gaining muscle mass because they were just gaining total mass. And with total mass comes more body fat and greater risk of metabolic disease, worse metabolic health. And that's interesting to me because there have been some other studies recently that say that people with more muscle mass have a higher risk of cardiovascular disease, higher risk of death. And it's not because they're going to the gym and getting super jacked and that's increasing their risk, right? It's that muscle just comes along for the ride when we're gaining more total mass. So that was the other thing that kind of like fell out of this, which I thought was super important as people then try and interpret, you know, somebody saying, hey, there's this paper saying that people with more muscle mass have worse health outcomes, therefore you shouldn't go to the gym and lift. That's complete nonsense, because that's not why those guys and girls, people are gaining more muscle.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So if you're just joining, I'll feed that back to you. Around 1,500 or so people in this cohort study that not directly collected in your lab. These are not hand-selected people of any kind. They're just all across the spectrum, men and women, all over the age of 60 in this analysis. But they could have been going in for this data collection for any number of reasons, for whatever site that they went into. The big finding, number one, was we had leg strength. It was leg press, right?
It was
leg extension.
It was an isokinetic leg extension.
Isokinetic leg extension. Okay, so the isokinetic leg extension predicted cognitive function, which is dope, right? Because we hear a lot of things about, oh, there's if we go all the way back to like, yeah, grip strength is related to overall health, but that's just a proxy for somebody being like overall healthy, right?
Yeah.
Which is like makes me want to strangle somebody, like quite frankly, when they say that. So let's go into this one right here. When you say that the leg strength on this isokinetic test was correlated to cognitive function, again, how do we measure cognitive function? How do we measure it? How was it measured in these data? Because we weren't the ones that collected it. And then walk me to like, wait a minute, is this correlation? Is this spurious correlation? Is this direct causation? Like, where do we land on that? And then walk me through how could it, if it is, like, how is it possible your leg strength is predicting your IQ or whatever it is? So give me the whole stick on that one.
Yeah, so
I teed you up for much there, so go ahead.
So these are data from NHANES, the National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey. So this is data that's collected in a different group of people every year, and there's supposed to be people that represent like the average American. That's like the whole idea. So it's kind of like gives us an idea of just like normal people. And so what we looked at, this isokinetic leg strength, the way we adjusted it and kind of made it fair, right, is that we looked at how strong you were on this test relative to your body size, right? Because we expect somebody who's bigger to be stronger, right? We want to take that out of the equation, right? So how strong are you relative to your size? And then the outcome was this test called the digit symbol substitution test, which is a test of like processing speed. It's one of these sort of general cognitive tests that's used in these kinds of studies to kind of give an idea of how good is your brain at processing things quickly. What you need to do is they give you a list of 9 different symbols, and they assign each one a number, and then you get this big grid with numbers, and you have to write the symbol that goes with that number underneath, and you have to do there's 133, and you have to do as many as you can in 2 minutes. So you have to do like more than one a second. So it's quite hard. And so that was our main outcome. It's sort of like an overall nice cognitive function test. And then we also adjusted for a whole bunch of important things. education status, blood pressure, blood sugar regulation, some nutrient things that are important for risk of cognitive decline, and as well as a whole bunch of physical activity things. Did they lift? Did they do vigorous physical activity? And how physically active were they in their day-to-day lives? So when you take all those things into account, you hopefully start to isolate the effect of that muscle itself, or the ability to generate force from like how healthy you are and other things. And this was also when we looked at the effect on the cognitive function test, I normalized it to age as well, because you just expect function to decrease with age. So we kind of took all of that into account. So in these kinds of studies, you can never say something is causative. Unfortunately, like epidemiology works like that. But we've taken into account a whole bunch of things that could be confounders, right? So then you can say, if you have better neuromuscular function, that was how we kind of described it, right? For your body size, you're able to generate more force with your legs, which requires a very functioning nervous system from the top all the way down. That seems to be associated with better general cognitive function. So then from there, you can think about a number of reasons why that might be the case. And there are certainly lots of studies that kind of agree with this, but there's the direct effects of exercise, right? That's going to kind of play in, and we know that lots of things get released when you exercise that can improve brain function, including lactate and irisin and taurine, right? That was a big one that people were talking about recently, like all those things. And then there's also some benefit from like stimulating that direct connection, right? That direct neuromuscular stimulus from generating work that creates a connection to the brain. So there are some other studies, randomized controlled trials, where you take people in their 70s, you get them in a gym, and they do something really simple. It's like 6 exercise like machines, 3 sets of 8, 3 times a week, right? They get stronger, as they should, and their cognitive function improves. So we know from other studies that you can intervene and you get causation there as well. So this is kind of a nice way of saying that at a much larger scale, the more force you can generate with your legs in general, the better your cognitive function, after taking into account all these other things that are important as well.
All right. So if we look at numerous other studies, countless studies that have looked at direct mechanism, you mentioned a bunch of them. A bunch of studies that have done more RCTs, so actual training protocols, longitudinal work, 6 weeks of training, 16 weeks of training, etc. And many of them have found direct strength training can lead to some improvements in cognitive function in some folks, right? We take that, we stack that against what we found, again, just cross-sectionally, right? So no intervention in our study, just looking at how do you perform right now and how strong are you right now, right? The only way for this to be not causative would be if somehow the people in this cohort, the stronger folks just happen to be smarter.
Yeah.
So what's the likelihood of that relative to the likelihood of what we have on the mechanism studies, the long-term studies, the actual trials, everything else like that? So while we can say it's causative,
so when you posted about this originally, somebody said something to the effect of like smarter people are more likely to do exercise or something, and I'm just not really sure we want to touch that. Nor is it like this. It's very possible that there's some socioeconomic things that play a role here. We know that. So education was actually our best predictor of cognitive function, right? Education is a marker of socioeconomic status, and then maybe you have more time to do exercise because you're not working 4 jobs to support your family, right? All of that is possible. Yeah, of course. However, when you have interventional studies that show, even in older people, like in this population, that you do some work, you improve your strength, and that directly improves cognitive function, I think we can say fairly confidently that at least some of this association is meaningful, is causative. And that's this is kind of like a statistical nerd thing, but even if you have observational data, if you've adjusted for all your confounders, what's left should be the causative association, right? And like most good statisticians will tell you that, even though like technically, of course, it's not causation, but what's left should be a signal that suggests that's the real thing.
I don't want to get us too off track, but the reality of it is showing causation is so much harder than anyone out there actually realizes. The vast majority of things that you think have been shown causation are still just correlation. Yeah. It's even mechanism studies are still mostly correlation.
Yeah.
Like super, super, super hard to show direct causation. Like almost fundamentally impossible. It's like really difficult. So we can go there. All right. That was sort of the first major finding. For those that have, again, maybe just joined in, can you remind them of the second big one and then give me the breakdown on that one as well?
Yeah, so the second major finding, well, I guess starts with what we described first in the paper, which is we separated people by how much muscle mass they have. And we were particularly interested in those who have low muscle mass, because recent studies have suggested those particularly with low muscle mass have faster cognitive decline. When we separated like low versus normal muscle mass, we didn't see a real difference in cognitive function. There was like a little one, but it wasn't very impressive. And so then, like, we looked at, well, across the entire range is like more muscle associated with better cognitive function on this test, and it wasn't. So then this led us down to thinking about, well, why does somebody gain muscle in the first place? There are two main reasons broadly. Well, you have to be in a caloric surplus. That's like, in general, right, accepted. But if you just gain total mass because you eat more than you need, some of that mass is going to be muscle, right? But it didn't come from any additional work necessarily. It doesn't come with additional neuromuscular function because you didn't train that muscle. It just sort of is mass. And that's what it looked like in this population. Those with more muscle also had more body fat. And then with that, both of those things came, they were less likely to exercise despite having more muscle. And they had worse metabolic health. They had worse blood sugar. They had, like the men in particular, had a higher waist circumference, right? So then we're talking like visceral adipose tissue, which we know is bad for pretty much everything. So when you're looking at population studies, and there are lots now that say muscle is good for this or bad for this, you have to think, well, how do we generate that muscle? And at least in this group, those who had more muscle were not gaining muscle because they were going to the gym. So then muscle as a measure isn't very useful, right? You have to look at muscle function, and that's why we had leg strength, which then kind of helps, make that less complicated.
Yeah. I don't think I necessarily need to dive too hard on that one. I feel like that one is about as straightforward as it possibly comes. Yeah. It's also not, I think it's more of one would maybe intuit that, but it was nice to actually show that directly and say, no, this is like confirmed. This is what you're looking at with this database. This is not necessarily people who have, again, as you mentioned, accrued their muscle mass via high quality fashion. So it's not necessarily per se that muscle is of lower quality, which it actually may be. But then we have the performance measures to say it probably is.
Yeah.
Because they're actually like not very strong.
Yeah. Yeah. When you sort of look, and I ran the statistical test, and I looked like, well, how well does all these different physical activity measures predict muscle mass? And it like didn't at all, like,
no.
which is completely shocking. And I think that's, again, it's really important because there are other studies out there recently published which say more muscle mass is associated with worse health outcomes. And then somebody says, well, because of this, you should get stronger, but you shouldn't gain muscle because the muscle is bad for your health. Like, I think that's just wrong.
Yeah.
Right? Because nobody took into account how that muscle was gained. So I think that's kind of dangerous telling people that, because.
Let me go further on that one, because, okay, let's say in studies like that, that they accounted for lean mass. It's still a problem.
Yeah.
Right? It's still a problem, because how was that lean mass accrued? Yeah. So, like, with that in mind, like, continue on what you're saying, like, why is that really dangerous, potentially? Maybe dangerous is too much, maybe not, but it's at least misleading.
Well, I think it has the potential to be dangerous because there's so much stuff out there that says you shouldn't go and lift weights because it gives you a high risk of injury, when actually, like, traditional bodybuilding training is super safe. Like, for a novice to start exercising, bodybuilding training is safer than going running in terms of injury risk.
Way safer.
Way safer.
Yeah.
So like people talking about injury risk, and then there's people saying, don't go to the gym and lift weights because you'll gain muscle, and muscle is bad for your health, like based on these like wrong
Inverted U's, right?
interpretations of the data. Yeah, exactly. And so I think it is potentially dangerous because like people get weaker and smaller and they lose muscle as they get older, and the best way to combat that is resistance training. And so anything that you're doing to make people not do that, I think, is potentially dangerous.
Yeah, I mean, my feeling. I would call it dangerous, but okay. I want to do one more thing here before we let you get back to your lovely Seattle day. You probably got some Atlas stones to go pick up, or a nature paper to
I've got
write
some
or something.
like 500-meter sprints to do on the rowing machine. I'm dreading it.
Oh, that's a Mike Nelson special, guaranteed.
It is. Yep.
Knew that one right away.
Yeah.
Thanks, Dr. Nelson. Okay, so I want to round up with kind of, what are the additional implications or applications for this? What's this mean for the average person? Things like that. And then before I do that, though, is there anything else? You mentioned the two big take-homes, but I remember actually, like you were saying earlier about how there was various associations that popped up that were sort of surprising. I remember a couple of them popped up, and I'm like, really? This is a stronger predictor than muscle was to physical activity, right? Like you're saying, like there was nothing in there but then there was stronger predictions between two things, and I'm like, geez, that's how bad this is. So, is there anything else in the paper that that the people would be interested in, that you were particularly interested in, more importantly, or anything else that maybe wasn't finding one or two, but just any other cool stuff that jumped to the top of mind?
I think it was good to kind of reaffirm all these other risk factors, right? Things that we think are important, and then kind of see them all come together. Because usually what happens when people include these things in papers, they kind of either adjust for it or they don't, and you never like see the outcome. Whereas what I like about our paper is I have these graphs where you can kind of see how everything's connected.
So cool.
So I think that's a nice thing. So if you're like a visual person, then I think the graphs are kind of cool to kind of like see how all the things relate to each other.
Let me explain what that means. So you imagine a circle, and all of these variables are on a circle, and then there are like a line, like a playground kind of like thing, gym advice, where it's like a bar from this one to this one, and you can see. And Tommy did a really cool thing, or Chris, or whoever did it. And like the thicker, the stronger the relationship between, the thicker the band is, and its colors, and it's kind of almost a little bit 3D. So it's a really cool visual to just sit there and go, oh, I see these variables are connected to these ones. Where traditionally, those would go on a table, and they would have R values and with numbers, and it would just be
and your
like
eyes
not
like go cross-eyed, and you'd never actually read it.
No, because you'd look and it'd just be like this long, and you're just like asterisks and numbers and zeros, and you just be like whatever. So, sorry, continue on, but that's what you mean with that really cool visual.
Yeah, I think no, I think that's it. That's kind of everything else. No, I think those are the major takeaways. I don't think there's anything else like highlight.
Okay.
But that is a highlight.
All right, great. Anything else that you want to say about the paper, or next step, or anything else that you want to chat about here? I don't want to keep you too long.
Only that, as we try and figure out what's causation here, like we have a cool project in the pipeline, just to kind of throw out some
tease it out. Go ahead.
Some hints, some teasers. So we'll actually be looking at whether these kinds of things are associated with improved like real muscle quality, right? That's your area of expertise in actual humans, as well as can we detect that with blood tests rather than having to do more invasive things, and how do they associate with like important outcomes? So like in this one it's just a cognitive function test, but how does it affect like your risk of dementia and other things? So we've got a whole bunch of stuff in the pipeline to kind of really nail down what's happening here, which I think is super cool.
Tommy, did you just tell the world that we're developing a blood test for muscle quality? I didn't.
No, I think you
say
did,
that.
Though.
Sounds like you said that.
I'm pretty sure you just said it.
One of us may have just said that.
I think I was vague enough, and then you just like went right out and said it.
No, I was clarifying, and you said you didn't say that, so I was clarifying. You said you didn't say that, so we'll see.
We'll see. Maybe.
Amazing, man. Where can obviously they can click on you and follow you here, but your lab does a ton of stuff. Mainly, I would say mainly is not fair, but I'd say the focus of it is brain
Yeah.
injury and things like that. But you produce and publish a ton of stuff otherwise. So if people want to read your stuff, follow your work, all that, besides here, is there anywhere else that they can see more of your stuff?
Yeah. I have a website, drtommywood.com. Like all my podcasts, like go on there. I have a podcast about the brain with my colleague, Dr. Josh Turknet, called the Better Brain Fitness Podcast. You can find that there as well. And
You have your own podcast?
yeah,
I didn't know that.
it's fairly new, but
Oh,
highly
that's cool.
recommended, obviously. um, and yeah, if you like to read papers, but then I put all my papers on the website as well, so there's lots of that.
Do you do like little blog breakdowns or anything on that website of your papers, or you just throw the paper up there?
I usually just throw the paper up there, but that is something that I can and should do when I have some time. It's a good idea.
Well, now you should hire somebody to do that.
Yeah,
because you're not going to have time.
No. I'll say I have time and then never have time. Yeah,
you're never going to have it. All right, man. Last thing. Anybody you need to give a shout out to for help on this this paper? Because obviously it wasn't just you and I that did this whole thing. Who else needs the credit here?
Yeah. So you mentioned Christy Storashuk a couple of times. She was the first author. She so I ran the statistics, but she like wrote a bulk of the paper with Ryan Garrios, who's a grad student at UW. So between the two of them, they basically made the paper happen because I like playing around with data, but then actually like sitting down and writing it out, again, it's hard to find the time. So the paper only exists because of them. And then Ben House or doctors Ben House and Greg Potter also co-authors and helped a lot with sort of shaping the narrative and making sure it all made sense and it was, you know, all the evidence behind it was good and all that good stuff. So a really awesome team actually of people that I love and are great, including you.
Yeah, man. It was a fun group that came up with lots of really good insights actually on this stuff. So glad we had some students that actually could make the paper happen.
Yeah.
And then some seasoned folks to get it through the finish line. Yeah. So dope, man. Really appreciate the time as always. Hopefully you all took something from this. Tommy is a wealth of information on a ton of stuff. So check out his podcast, his papers. And then, actually, last one I want to ask. If they have more questions about this paper, probably sending you DMs is not the approach. I think maybe if you've got this posted up on Instagram somewhere, they can ask in the comments. Is that the most appropriate way, or your website, or how would they go about that?
Ask in the comments when this gets posted. But if you think it's like a critical and important question, then I would recommend go to my website, click on the link to the podcast. And the way our podcast works is most of the episodes are Q&A. So people submit questions and we answer them. So if you've got a question and you think other people are interested in the answer, and we already talked about that, we did an episode about this paper as well a couple of weeks ago. So submit a question there and then we'll answer it and other people can benefit hopefully from the answer as well.
And what is that episode posted of the podcast where you cover the paper?
Yeah, it was posted either last week or the week before.
Do you remember what it's called? Is episode number or anything that you remember?
I do not remember.
Okay.
But if you just go to the Better Brain Fitness podcast, it was either the last episode or the episode before that, depending on when you.
All right, that'll be up. It shouldn't be too hard to find, and they'll cover further breakdown if you want a full recording of this. So, all right. Anything else?
That's it. Thanks, man. This was awesome, and thanks everybody for tuning in.
Yeah, we probably should have done some Q&A and all that stuff, but I think half an hour is about like appropriate for this. I could have done a whole bunch more, but I think this was good. So
next time.
Yeah, man. And if y'all want more, let us know. I'm happy to bring on Dr. Wood anytime here. Maybe next time we'll just do the live session when you're on that rower.
Oh, yeah.
We'll see how you can answer questions.
Yeah, if you just, well, I'm not sure I will be able to speak. Consider, like, if I think about how terrible I felt last week, I'm not going to be a very good guest. But you guys can watch me torture myself, I guess. Thanks, Mike. Again.
See you, man.